You're standing at a threshold in life and career. Behind you, everything you built. The reputation that perhaps arrived slowly, hard earned, and then it somehow came all at once. The work that truly matters in a field where most people are still trying to succeed. The financial ground that you fought for and that you now stand on. The version of you that created all of that is really damn proud because you're capable, you're proven, you're formidable in ways that most people in your orbit don't fully realize. And yet, in front of you, something you can feel but don't really have a name for it exists. It's a pull, a pressure, not a crisis or a breakdown, and it's definitely not something wrong. It feels like a signal or a summons. Clear enough to take seriously, unclear enough that you can't yet see what it's asking you to become. Somewhere in that gap, as poetic as that sounds, somewhere in that gap between what you've built and what you feel pulling you forward into your future, there's a question that you're being asked to live. Where is the version? Who is the version of me who can do what I now feel is being asked of me? That is the question. That is the edge. And if you're here and you've listened to any of our other material, you know that the answer isn't going to be more strategy. It's not optimization. It's not more info. You've tried the thinking. You're intelligent. The thinking isn't the problem. What you're standing on, I want you to know this. I've lived it. It has a name, and I want to tell you about it today. There is an enormous amount of content built for people who know exactly what they want in known fields with known job titles, and they just need some help getting there. I love that. And there's a fair amount built for people who are in genuine crisis as well. Lots of support there for people who need to find their footing again. But there is almost nothing built for the person standing at what I call the trailblazer threshold. The trailblazer threshold is not a crisis point. It is an edge point. And the difference matters enormously because at a crisis point, you need support. You might even say you need rescue, right? But at an edge point, you need something else. You need capacity. You need company. You need the kinds of people who have lived it and continue to live it so that you can step into territory that doesn't have a trail yet. The person at this threshold has usually gotten here by something that high performers are exceptionally good at, creating their own path. There's no conventional progression for them. There never is. Whether or not they climbed the ladder, they would at some point have figured out that the ladder didn't go where they wanted to go. So they built the next thing, and the next thing, and the next. And often before anyone else could see what they're building, they invented their own job titles more than once. And you probably recognize yourself in that. But now you're standing somewhere new. And the usual tools, the usual go-to strategies are stale. The analytical mind that has served you so well, that has built real things, solved real problems, created results that most people are still trying to reverse engineer. Well, that brilliant mind is now running up against something that it can't fully compute. And it's been my experience, having been in this work for well over a decade, that the conventional world has two responses to offer. First response: you must be in crisis, something's wrong, take a sabbatical, see a therapist, you're probably just burned out. Second approach: optimize harder, there's got to be a better system, build better habits, gather another certification in an adjacent domain. Neither of those paths is the thing. And the person in the trailblazer threshold, right on that edge, knows it, which is part of what makes this part of evolution so disorienting, because you can see really clearly that what's being offered doesn't fit. You open up a search tool to try to find a video and an article that can help you, but yet, you know what? What do you even type in there? There's no video that can explain how exactly what the map is that you need for your next chapter, because you don't yet have language for what's needed. And so you wait, you gather more information, you watch, you assess. The question keeps you up all night. You hold the question at arm's length, and you tell yourself that you'll just move when the picture becomes clearer. The picture doesn't get clearer because the picture isn't the problem. Here's what I know from living at this threshold, not visiting it, living it, as a condition of how I operate, and from working with people who do the same. The map doesn't exist because you're the one writing it, even while you walk it. Remember way back in the day, before we had GPS, before we had every inch, what feels like every inch of terrain on planet Earth mapped out implicitly, before satellites and all of that, we had explorers. We had real trailblazers and cartographers. We had map makers. And they would take adventures on the edge of what most people would determine would be fatal. And they would go into terrain where they didn't know what waited for them or if they would ever return. There was no guarantee. But as they walked, they would chart the territory. They would learn the laws of the wilderness. They would learn about themselves and who was at their right and their left. And they would draw the map so that others who came after them could have more than what they had when they started. That's what it means to be an edge walker, a trailblazer, everything I'm talking about in this video. So that's not a consolation. It's not a reframe that's designed to make you feel better about being uncertain. It is an accurate description of what's happening. When you are genuinely at your edge, not someone else's edge, not the edge of a program that was designed to be edgy, but your actual frontier, there is no trail because no one has stood in the exact place you are standing right now. The uncertainty isn't a sign that something is wrong. It's a sign that it's real and it's yours. The question the trailblazer threshold asks is not, what do I want to do next? That's the question for people choosing between existing options. The question the trailblazer threshold asks is, who do I need to become in order to create what I already can feel pulling at me? Who do I need to become to create what I can't completely see? That is fundamentally different kind of work. It cannot be thought into existence. The mind that got you here, that's impressive, capable, proven, maybe even self-taught, is not the primary instrument for this next crossing. And I'm not saying the mind becomes irrelevant. You keep all of that. I'm saying it can't lead this. And for the kind of person I'm describing, that is one of the most confronting things that they might encounter, because the mind has always led. The mind has always been the asset. What this threshold actually requires is embodied capacity. The embodiment to be with the unknown without collapsing into it or running from it. To receive the signal, the download of what's pulling you forward and to move towards it. To stay in the discomfort of becoming without defaulting to the familiar identities and performances of competence. That capacity is not built through information. It's built through experience. And it builds faster, significantly faster, when you're not navigating it alone. Before I go further, everything I'm describing, the threshold, the pattern, the way that the signal to your own evolution arrives, and how the mind responds, it shows up differently depending on who you are. And I mean that precisely, not generally. The way you personally, insert your name, process pressure, where your genius actually lives, what separates you from what you have trained to perform, what happens in your body and your decisions when stakes are real, how you break down, and where your hidden advantages are buried underneath of that breakdown. All of that, we built a diagnostic for this. Because the trailblazer who knows themselves at that level of specificity, their native genius, blind spots, hidden architecture, they move through this threshold faster and with far less unnecessary cost than the one who is still guessing and piecemealing it from everything out there. This diagnostic tool, the first step of it, not the whole thing, but the first step, is called the Somatic Skins Quiz. And the link for that tool is in the description. I want you to have it. You might even consider taking it before you listen to the rest of this video or do anything else. You can do so, you can come back and you can finish watching. What you find out about yourself in the next few minutes can make the rest of this video land differently. All right. I want to tell you about someone. They had spent decades becoming someone genuinely masterful, not in one domain, in several. Disciplines that carried their own rigor, their own history and lineages, their own exacting standards of excellence, traditional fields, respected fields. They had done the real work and they knew it. And over time, because they had spent so long, decades even, on those adjacent tracks, something started to happen that they didn't know how to name. The threads between those domains, the places where one discipline illuminated another, where the combination of mastery produced something that none of those fields alone could generate. They started weaving themselves together into something new, something in service of a need in the world that they could feel clearly, but they couldn't yet point to as something anyone else was doing. It was a vision, theirs, a movement that the world didn't have yet and needed. The person that they had always wished existed for them. That's actually what they were in the process of becoming. And that scared them. They stopped for years. They kept going back to old work. They kept trying to figure it out more and more. And that wasn't because they lacked skill. And it certainly wasn't because their vision was unclear. It was because they were waiting for someone to tell them that it was a legitimate thing. They were waiting for a credential that would somehow, like gold star, authorize them for what they were already doing and being, what they had been doing naturally, freely, generously for people who needed it for longer than they could remember, honestly. The credential didn't exist. And that wasn't because the work didn't require mastery. It was because they were the first person to stand in that exact intersection of multiple domains. There was no formalized training for what they could do because no one had ever combined those particular disciplines in that particular way for those particular needs before. So they weren't missing a credential. They were in a category of one. And because of that, no one was coming to sign the permission slip because there is no one qualified to sign it. You can't get permission from someone who hasn't been where you're going. That is the trailblazer threshold. And what those years of waiting cost them, not in money or in missed opportunities in the conventional sense, although yes, to both of those, but in the slow erosion of something that was already real. It was already theirs. That's the thing worth sitting with. It was like choosing to live with stagnancy and death and new life growing in the same body takes a toll. This isn't an unusual story, by the way. It is a true one, but it's not an unusual story among the people that we work with. It is nearly universal. Not in people who are unprepared or unqualified. These are people who are standing at the edge of something genuinely significant. They're overprepared and they're under-authorized, if you will. Maybe some of them are waiting for external permission or more of a sense of a surety or guarantee that's never going to arrive. That's why we're here. So, what does it take to actually move through that threshold rather than stall at it? It's not going to be more research. It's not going to be another framework. It's not going to be another certification in an adjacent domain. The person at this threshold is often one of the most informed people in any room they walk into. What's required is the development of the person, what we call the soma, underneath the strategy. The one who has to make irreversible decisions, the one who has to act before the picture is clear, the one who has to step across a threshold that cannot be uncrossed, and to do all of that without the guarantee of a safe landing on the other side. That takes some moxie. And here's what I know about how this threshold moves. The signal arrives before the clarity does. Always. The knowing that it's time comes before the knowing of exactly what and how that is going to come next. And the window between those two knowings, the gap, is where most people stall out. Because the internal signal or the external environment will say move. And the mind will say, ooh, be careful, like we don't want to be reckless, right? The mind says not yet. We don't know enough yet. We don't have enough information. Maybe somebody can just like show me how this is supposed to be. I need to wait till it's safer. I have a lot going on in my life. I need to wait until it slows down. Wait until someone gives you permission. And the longer that you wait, the louder the signal gets. Like, not volume or chaos loud, but like this angst. It's an invisible pain that most people will never understand, but you know what I'm talking about. And the more that resistance compounds, it isn't because you're weak. It's because the gap between where you are and where you're being called, it widens every day, and that tension, like a rubber band, increases every day that you don't cross it. What starts as discomfort becomes stagnancy if it continues. And what starts as a quiet pull, as I said, it becomes a kind of suffering that's really hard to name because nothing is technically wrong. You have a lot to be grateful for. Everything is fine, but something is dying. The crossing of the threshold goes better with skilled support. Not accountability partners, not necessarily just any old networking or any old mastermind. You need a place that's designed for people playing a different game. Some peoples who have lived at this threshold themselves, who know what the signal feels like, what the resistance costs, how to move through it, what irreversible action is actually required in the body, not just in a binder or on a whiteboard. And it goes better in the company of others as well who are living the same way, because the default world, the mainstream, the conventional conversations, they genuinely cannot hold this experience. And that isn't because that path is inferior and yours is superior or vice versa. It's just because they're oriented toward a different kind of life. When you try to explain the trailblazer threshold to someone who has never stood there, you get confusion at best, and concern for you at worst. And it's easy to start to wonder if you're the problem. You're not the problem. You're just in the wrong room. There's a version of this threshold that people will navigate by waiting it out. So they will gather more information, more proof, more certainty, until eventually some external event forces the decision. Or, this is even more tragic, the signal ends up fading. I think out of like mercy, enough that they can return to the familiar-ish. That signal fading, that numbing, is not resolution. It's a resignation of the psyche, and you'll feel the difference even in your body before your mind really knows how to make sense of it. Your mind will justify it. But there's another version, not where you see the signal, the pull, the tension, the pressure as a problem, and then you anesthetize it. But let me paint the other opportunity where you recognize the signal for what it is. It's a summons to be answered, where you understand that the clarity that you're waiting for, it's not a prerequisite to movement and decision. It's a consequence of it. So where the irreversible action, the step across the threshold that cannot be uncrossed, that is the thing that begins to write the map. I have ended things personally at the height of their success because the form had completed, and I could feel, after many rounds, I could feel the threshold gap between stagnancy, but yet surety and guarantee, even accolades, and truth of evolution. And staying in the old would have meant choosing the container over the evolution it was built to serve, the aliveness. I've also stepped into things with no external set of permission, no external authority, and all the lived and trained credentials, of course, but still no guarantee that it was going to work. I have done it alone, and I have done it with skilled support and aligned community. And I will tell you without hesitation which version costs less and produces more in all the ways. The map gets written by moving, by being a full yes to something that you can't fully see yet. I want you to know that you're not behind, you're at the edge. If you took the Somatic Skins diagnostic earlier, you can go back to it now with fresh eyes, and what you just heard about the threshold, about the signal, about how the breakdown works and your hidden advantages. You could look at your results through that trailblazer lens where it starts to get really specific to you. Over the next few days as well, since you took the quiz, you'll also receive a number of orientation letters to this way of living, this way of working, what we're doing, how our community, or whether or not this is the skilled support for you. So, mark those emails as safe, as the saying goes, and enjoy. And shamelessly, if you want to know what it's like to move through this kind of threshold in the company of trailblazers who are built for it, the link to join us for a season in the Prestige is also in the description below. It's not for everyone, but if what I described today felt less like watching a video and more like being seen, well, consider this part of your summons to reach out. I'll look forward to connecting with you.